Hey, stolen cousins, you already know what time it is. And I made it horror stories. Animated horror stories. Oh, what's your favorite cousin? So, the caption says, okay, dark Facebook tales. See what happens in these 3 dark horror animated stories. So what's that? 3 Facebook horror stories animated. What did y'all be doing on the Facebook? The last one I seen that was like, ooh, was when that guy was looking for like a kidney for his child, and someone was like doing crazy films on the black market. And it was just a whole lot of. He tried to have him cut his kidney out. He didn't want to do it, so he was going to cut his kidney out. Let's get into it. Let's see what's going on here. SSG Animations, you already know the homies. As I always say, feel free to go over to their pages. You know, you go to the page, you can subscribe, you can turn the notification bell on, you can watch their stuff. That way, you know, you're not watching what they did months ago with me. But also, you're here with me, so let's get right into it. I love you guys. Grab a blunt, grab a blanket, grab a bottle of water, and grab a bag of chips, okay? What is y'all doing on the Facebook?
Hi, I'm Stannis, and the story I'm about to tell you happened around 2006, 2007, when Facebook had just started to become big. Hi, I'm Stannis, and the story I'm about to tell you happened around 2006, 2007, when Facebook had just started to become big. I was in my college back then, and just like every student, I too had a Facebook account. In the beginning, it was all fun and games.
How old were you?
We used our Facebook accounts to invite each other to parties and share pictures or circulate any important news around the campus. All was going well until James was killed mysteriously in his dorm room, and the only clue left behind by the killer was a creepy smiling picture of James as his profile picture on Facebook. James was a junior, and his death shocked the whole college. Back in the day, Photoshop wasn't so popular, so only a few people had access to it, especially the students and teachers who worked on the college magazine or any such things. Immediately, all these students and teachers were called in for inquiry, but after days of interrogation, there was no clue as to who killed James. A few weeks must have passed since James passed away. Slowly, everything in the college was going back to normal when Cindy's dead body was found in one of the stalls of the girls' bathroom. And to everyone's surprise, her Facebook profile pic too was changed to a creepy smiling picture of her. The police were baffled by 2 murders in a span of a few weeks in a university. All the students were scared as it was clear that this killer wasn't going to stop at killing one student. The investigative efforts were spread throughout the town now, and the story of 2 murdered students had hit national television. My friend Mike and I were roommates, and although we were seniors, we were still pretty scared of a serial killer on the loose. Although we had different classes, we made sure to accompany one another anywhere we'd go. We locked our door and checked our dorm room multiple times a day to make sure there was no trespassing. The tension and the thick atmosphere in the college could be cut by a knife. Everyone was on high alert. New security was hired, and everyone was advised to avoid being alone anywhere on campus. Almost a month went by, and the police found no lead, and it felt like the case had hit a dead end, until Sam was killed. He was a senior and lived in the same dorm as me. He was killed in the library. The death of Sam had snapped something inside of every one of us. Now, students weren't sad or scared anymore. They were angry at whoever was killing their peers. Everyone, be it the staff or the students, were allowed to carry a small pocket knife, pepper spray, or things like that to protect themselves. When the police checked Sam's Facebook page, his profile pic was changed to a creepy smiling one too. There was no correlation between any students who had died, except the fact that they were all studying in the same college, and they all had Facebook accounts. When this information was disclosed by the cops, everyone started deleting their Facebook accounts. Mike and I deleted ours too. The next murder happened a mere 2 days after Sam's death. This time, it was a girl named Marissa. She was a senior too, and she hadn't deleted her account, which meant her profile pic was changed to a creepy smiling one too. This time, the college authorities had decided to terminate the semester and go on lockdown. All the students were supposed to go home until the killer was caught. Mike and I started to pack our bags, eager to get away from all the drama and death.
It's in Mike.
That's when we heard it. A soft thumping coming from our shared bedroom. More like it was coming from our closet space. That's when we realized we hadn't checked our dorm room that day, as we were too excited to go home. I was ready to bail through the front door, but Mike didn't budge. In fact, he started walking towards our bedroom with me in tow. As soon as Mike stepped into the bedroom, the closet door opened and out stepped a black hooded figure. Before Mike or I could do anything, Mike was stabbed in the neck by the figure. I thought that I was going to be the next victim, but instead the figure dropped the bloody knife and walked up to me and handed me a note before running away. I opened the note and it said, "I've got my revenge. To know why I killed these students, go to." A Facebook account ID was mentioned. Everything was too much for me to take in, so I went out of the dorm room screaming and crying, mourning for the loss of my best friend. Soon, all the authorities were contacted and our dorm room was sealed as a crime scene. I handed the note to the officer and the cyber cell cracked the password of the Facebook account. What was revealed in the investigation was straight out of any student's nightmares. The 4 students who were killed were all part of a Facebook group that bullied other students, especially who came from a poor background. It was unbelievable that Mike was a part of all this. Throughout our time together, he never struck me as a bully. In fact, he used to help people so much. The 4 students who handled this group posed indecent pictures of their target. They cyberbullied the student without actually coming face to face with him or her. This was a very twisted thing, and because of the bullying, 3 students dropped out of college. This was a very sick and twisted game these 4 students were playing with, the life of other students. Also, if anyone decided to tell the authorities, it was of no use as the parents of these 4 kids were affluent and would easily end the matter if it were to harm their kids. It was revealed that the killer was an Asian girl from junior year who was the latest target of this group. After being brutally bullied online, she decided to get revenge and end this cycle once and for all. Later, when there was an extensive search going on to find her, it was revealed that once she murdered Mike, she flew back to her hometown the same night, never to return. I was heartbroken that my friend could be such a monster, and more shocking was the fact that Facebook could be used to do so much harm than good. Lastly, the 4 bullies used to post a creepy smiling picture of their victims on the Facebook group, and that's what the killer did too.
Stop being bullies, y'all. Especially in college.
Hi guys, my name is Carson, and the story I'm about to tell you will seem like something out of a secret deep web store or some unknown sleazy website. But believe it or not, the danger is much closer than you think, because where this happened to me is on nothing more and nothing less than Facebook. It all started one day when I was trying to sell a bed for my mother. Hers was a bit old and made her back hurt, so it was time to change it, and for that I had to get rid of the old one. After taking all the pictures, I started to upload them on several social networks, and I thought, why not Facebook Marketplace? People of my generation don't use this social network much anymore, but I knew that now it's changed a lot, and it could be used to find a partner, watch videos, and even sell things. After posting it, a few days went by, and I saw that the post had several responses asking about the bed, like the material it was made of, or if I could sell it at a cheaper price. But among all the comments, one of them caught my attention. Ryan G. responded, and in a very direct way, he said that it was the bed he was looking for and that he wanted to buy it right away. He asked me where to pick it up, and I gave him my home address. I had no problem with him coming here anyway, and I and my siblings would be here, so no one would dare to do anything out of the ordinary. Once I sent him the address, the man stopped answering me. Had he changed his mind? As the days went by, new buyers appeared. I also gave the address to a couple who told me they wanted the bed to leave in their guest room, and they very kindly came, paid, and took it away. But it's not these people that I want to focus on, but Ryan, to whom I originally gave the address. Since the day it all happened, a strange car started parking across the street. I knew that this car didn't belong to the neighbors, as they were just 2 poor old people who would never complain about having a strange car on the sidewalk. Every afternoon, the car would just park there for hours. No one would get in, no one would get out. My brothers and I thought about going to see who was there, but every time we touched the window, the tinted windows wouldn't roll down and we couldn't see who was inside. After a few days, we began to notice that the car was alone when my mom was there, and that scared us even more. My mom started receiving messages from this Ryan G. The messages were quite disturbing. He would describe what she was wearing and what she did that day. And to make it even more terrifying, he would ask her about the things he knew she was going to do the next day. We asked my mom who this man was and why she had him among her Facebook friends, and she said she didn't know, that she thought she had seen him attending a nearby store. While we were having this conversation, something stopped my heart and almost made me scream out loud. I raised my head and saw a strange silhouette looking at us from the window. The window was almost closed, but there was still enough room to see eyes through it. What was really terrifying was that the window was inside the house, and behind it, it was barred. Someone was invading our house. I ran desperately to where the invader was, while my mother had to call my siblings. When I got outside, there was no one there. The person was like a ghost. I walked back inside the house, but something surprised me. The door on the house was closed. Suddenly, I heard a scream behind it. It was my mom.
Oh!
Carson, help! Someone had broken into the house. When I went around the house to see who was spying on us, that person must have climbed up through the roof and got inside the house and closed the door. I banged and kicked the door as hard as I could, but it was no use. My mother's cries for help turned into screams of pain as I continued to slam on the door as hard as I could. After several seconds, the screaming stopped, and with a final lunge, the door broke. When this happened, I realized that the house was totally shut down. Someone had cut the power supply from the inside. At that moment, I realized something. This person knew our house inside and out. He had surely planned this for months, looking at all the pictures my mom posted on Facebook and familiarizing himself with the home. The only thing he was missing was the address where my mother lived, and I gave it to him. I started walking in the dark, listening to faint moans coming from my mother's room where the bed used to be. The moans were getting fainter and fainter. I had to get there before I stopped hearing them completely. I finished reaching the direction they were coming from, but before I got closer, I bumped into something. It was a person, but it was soaked with something. My eyes adapted little by little to the light, and that's when I realized that that person was my mother. And what she was soaked with was blood. Little by little, my brain began to understand what my eyes were seeing. My mother's neck was open, and blood was still rushing out of it. I fell to the floor crying, not realizing that something else was going on in the house. If my mother was dead, whose moans were those? At this realization, my answer answered itself. From where the hemorrhages were coming from, a terrifying and enormous man jumped on me with a huge knife. I stood up quickly and dodged it, but that didn't stop him from stabbing me in the leg. I screamed in pain as I saw my huge attacker and my mother's killer. This was Ryan. I didn't have a picture on Facebook, but I didn't need one. As soon as I saw his deformed, psycho face, I realized it was him. Filled with anger, I rushed towards him, but it was useless. He stopped me halfway with his huge hand and threw me against the wall as if I were a rag doll.
Oh, damn.
This terrifying man walked slowly towards me, like a hunter enjoying torturing his prey. Suddenly, I heard a noise at the front door, and when I realized that they were probably my brothers, I looked to the front and realized that the killer was no longer there. "Guys, run! There's a killer here!" This scream only made my brothers run faster into the house, and this was the worst mistake they could have made. Ryan leapt out of the shadows at one of them and stabbed him savagely in the back. My younger brother immediately fell to the ground, dead. My other brother tried to escape. His eyes were not yet adapted to the darkness, and there was no way they could have confronted him, but apparently escape was not an option either. Before my older brother could reach the light, the man grabbed him from behind and threw him against another wall, back into the darkness. My brother tried to get up, but couldn't. The killer was in front of him, with the knife in his hand raised, ready to stab him. But I wasn't going to let that happen.
You just got thrown,
Dizzy from losing so much blood, I jumped on top of the villain, and we both started struggling on the ground. My brother reacted quickly to the fight and took the knife out of his hands that he used to kill our family. And while I held the killer, my brother stabbed him to death. The nightmare was over, but in return, my mother and younger brother were dead. Shortly thereafter, We realized that
Boy,
this man
I
had
knew it was
indeed
some
stalked our
shit
mother on Facebook,
when you gave
sending
out
her
the
terrifying
address.
messages under different accounts. She decided to keep quiet. Surely she didn't want to worry us. From that day on, I don't accept people I don't know on any social network. My children, terrified by what happened to their young grandmother, do the same. I advise you to do the same. Even though you could be friends on Facebook with a person,
You
in
don't
real
know that
life,
motherfucker at
they
all.
can become your killer.
I believe that one of the greatest forms of love on earth is the love one has for one's child.
I agree.
I'm pretty sure that every parent knows this, as most parents won't think twice about doing anything for their children. But when push comes to shove, I don't know how far many parents will be willing to go for their children. And while I don't wish this ghastly scenario you're about to hear on any parent, on the 17th of May 2017, I realized just how far I was willing to go for my son Richardson, as the love I have for him put me through the most morbid experience I have
This is the
ever
one I
gone
told
through in my
y'all
life.
about.
To understand why I went
I
through
ain't
this
even gotta
experience,
tag ya.
I'll have to take you 8 years back to the year
Ooh, I'm
2015,
low-key excited. I
the
don't
worst
even gotta
year
tag
of my
ya.
life. It all started in the month of January. I had just received some painful news as I was told that my 19-year-old son, Richardson, had failing kidneys. The news came as a shock as I knew my son, Richardson, wasn't a heavy drinker. I remember asking the doctors with tears in my eyes how and why this happened, and as usual, they just told me that it was one of those things. I remember breaking down in the hospital as my boy at the age of 19 was just about to start living his life, and this unfortunate situation had put an immediate stop to it. I managed to put myself together that day as I frantically asked the doctors for possible solutions. I remember them telling me that at this stage, a kidney donation would be my best bet. So I immediately offered up myself as a candidate. But after being tested, I was told that I wasn't a suitable candidate. In their own words, a kidney donor must have a compatible blood type with the recipient, and my son Richardson had an O blood type, similar to his mother's, and it was completely different from mine. The news crushed me as I had lost Richardson's mother during his birth, and he was the only one I had left. With my possible donation out of the way, I was told my next option was to add Richardson's name to the kidney donation waiting list. And even if the doctors didn't tell me, I knew that was already a lost cause, as most people wait 5 to 7 years, and we didn't have that time. With no other viable options, my son started to go through endless kidney dialysis sessions, and I had no other choice but to watch and hope that things would get better. The year 2015 soon came to an end, and it looked like there was no possible solution in sight. I remember taking matters into my own hands as I looked for solutions everywhere I could throughout 2016. I reached out to friends and extended family members. I called numerous other doctors and asked for second and third options, but at the end of it all my efforts were to no avail. I wasn't really a religious man at this point in my life, but I remember calling out to a higher power to help me in my time of need. And while I still didn't get a solution to help my dying son, strangely enough, just when I had lost all hope, the popular social media platform called Facebook would bring the solution I so desperately needed the very next year. I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this knows about the popular social media platform called Facebook. And since it was a massive social media tool, it was one of the many platforms I had used to get the word out there on my son's condition. I had actually made a post on the platform asking people if they knew any willing donor with an O blood type early in the year 2016. And it wasn't till the 12th of April 2017 that I finally got a viable answer. I had gotten a strange message on the Facebook platform from someone who had viewed the post, and he told me that there was a man on the Facebook marketplace who was willing to help me out. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Facebook marketplace was a service that had just recently launched in the year 2016. I remember being very confused as I wondered if this was a joke or if the person was actually being serious. But since it was my only feasible option, I went through with it. I eventually got in contact with the man on Facebook Marketplace, and his name was Mr. Ernie Green. After talking for a while, Ernie told me that he had type O blood and he was willing to donate. I then asked what his price was, as I knew he wasn't going to donate his kidney for free. But Ernie sent me a message that read, "The price really doesn't matter, Mr. Kenneth, but I will, however,
But it
require you
does,
to carry out
though.
a particular service for me. I would go on to explain the requirements of this service, but the details are too sensitive to be texted over the phone, so I'll give you an address where you can meet and talk more about this in person. I was shocked by Mr. Ernie's message, as I knew very well that something wasn't right. I had already done endless research ever since my son got this illness, and I knew illegally buying a human kidney from a willing donor would cost me anywhere from $50,000 to $160,000, as the prices were never
Kidneys
really
are
fixed.
expensive.
I also knew that since my son had O blood type, the potential price of the kidney would increase as most potential donors with this blood type sold their kidneys for around $262,000. Now, I knew full well while doing my research that I didn't have anything close to these absurd amounts in my bank account, but I was willing to do anything, whether it was borrowing from my friends and family or selling everything that I had to raise the money for my child once I found a potential donor. Which is why seeing Mr. Ernie's price, free proposal after all this, felt too good to be true. It wasn't long before Mr. Ernie sent me the address where we would meet on the 17th of May, 2017. As the fateful day of my meeting with Mr. Ernie inched closer, I found myself getting more and more anxious as I wondered what the service he wanted me to do for him was. I hadn't told anyone about the meeting, not even my son Richardson, as Mr. Ernie said if I wanted to get the kidney for my son, I should speak the details of our meeting to no one. But just to be on the safe side, I told my best friend Christopher Hands about it, as I trusted that man with my life.
Gotta tell somebody.
Christopher wasn't too keen on the entire ordeal, as he also felt something was off about this. I remember him telling me, "I don't know, Kenneth, but this entire thing sounds wrong. I mean, how are you so sure this Eric guy is telling the truth? He might be a kidnapper or human trafficker who's trying to lure you in. Don't get me wrong, I know how dire things are, but you really aren't thinking straight, Kenneth, because even if this guy Eric is telling the truth, you and I both know that buying or doing any sort of service for this man's kidney is illegal." I knew everything Chris told me was the truth, but I also knew I had no choice, so I responded with, "You think I don't know that, Chris? I've probably thought about everything you just said numerous times before, but what choice do I have? My boy is dying in the hospital, and I have done nothing but sit and watch him for 2 years. I can't keep waiting on a damn kidney donation waiting list because we don't have that time, Chris. And while I'm grateful for all the help you have given me and my son during these trying times, this is something I have to do. I know it's illegal and dangerous, but it's the only option I have to save my son, and I love him too much to let it pass me by." Christopher knew I wasn't going to change my mind, so he told me he'd support me. He also offered to go with me, but I told him that I was instructed to go alone. I then told him to promise me that if anything did happen to me, he'd take care of my son Richardson, and he assured me that he would. Christopher's assurance gave me peace of mind as I was now ready to face whatever it was that I was supposed to do on that fateful day. The 17th of May finally arrived, and I went to the address where I was supposed to meet Mr. Ernie. I was picked up by a couple of men, and I was driven to a warehouse-like building. I was then ushered into a room where I saw Mr. Ernie and 2 other hooded figures. Before anything was said, I knew I had gotten myself into something really wrong, as I noticed the 2 hooded men were holding both cameras and film equipment. Mr. Ernie then walked up to me and said, "Hello, Mr. Kenneth. It's nice to finally meet you." I wasn't ready to exchange pleasantries, so I bluntly responded with, "What do you need me to do?" Mr. Ernie then smiled as he said, "That's great. I like a direct man that goes straight to business. So, I'll tell you what you want to know.
Boy.
I'm sure you're already wondering what astronomical price I'm going to call for the donation of my kidney, but you can rest assured that I'm not going to take your life savings for the donation of my kidney. As a matter of fact, what I need you to do for it is pretty simple." Mr. Ernie, who now had a sadistic smile on his face, then picked up a small medical blade as he continued with, "All I need you to do is cut it out of me." I was completely baffled now, as it took my mind a couple of minutes to comprehend what Mr. Ernie had just said.
Crazy.
1,000 questions ran through my mind, but the first thing I said was, "Are you going to film this?" Mr. Ernie then responded with, "Of course, Mr. Kenneth. You see, we are a niche group of artistic filmmakers, and this is our genre." Some might call what we do snuff films, but I believe what we make is true art. We usually film videos that contain infliction or self-infliction of pain, but we always take it up a notch as we sometimes carry out mock surgeries with real individuals like myself, without anesthesia. And the best part is that these so-called surgeries are carried out by everyday people like you, which makes it so much better as you have no idea what you're doing.
He said that.
My mind was trying to comprehend all the information being thrown at me, but I managed to stay calm as I stuttered out the words. I'm not saying I have agreed to do any of this madness, but even if I did, the kidney that you have promised me might be damaged in this unethical process. Mr. Ernie then said, I understand your concern, Mr. Kenneth, but you have my word that once you cut me open on camera, a fully functional and capable kidney will be shipped to the hospital your son is staying at. I know all of this is a lot to take in, but if I were you, I'd take this deal as it is a pretty good bargain. It was a really horrifying experience, seeing this man liking the act of cutting out his kidney to getting a bargain at the local Walmart. It was a pretty disturbing thing to consider, but I told myself that I had already come this far. Don't get me wrong, I was scared shitless, but it was either this or watching my son die, and he was all I had, so I stuttered the words, I'll do it. I saw a sick smile on Mr. Ernie's face as he said, That's great, Kenneth. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Your son would be proud, and to make things easier, you don't need to worry about your identity because your face will be blurred in the final cut. Mr. Ernie then took off his clothes, and the sight of his bare body was ghastly. He had numerous scars all over his upper body, and the little prosthetics on his feet meant that he was missing some of his toes. Then they handed me the blade as they drew out the surgical lines on Mr. Ernie's body, and when they were done, they told me to begin. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. My hands were shaking vigorously now, and my heart was beating fast, but I knew it was now or never, so I took the blade and I started cutting. Mr. Ernie's screams filled the room as the blade came in contact with his skin. I could tell that these weren't screams of pain, but of joy and pleasure, as I could see he was getting aroused by this. Ernie's blood started to pour everywhere now as I made my way across the dotted outline. I knew he could die from this massive blood loss, so I stuttered the words, He's losing a lot of blood. Should I stop? But I was told to keep going. My vision was blurry now, and I couldn't feel my hands anymore. I didn't know if I could keep going at this point, and for a split second, I had a moment of enlightenment as I asked myself what my son Richardson would say if he saw me doing this morbid act. I knew then and there that he wouldn't like it if I continued to carry out this ghastly act, even if it was to save his life. So halfway through the dotted lines, I stopped. Ernie, who was somehow still conscious after all that, asked, Why did you stop? And I stuttered the words,
You freaky
I'm
bastard.
sorry, but I can't keep doing this. I could see rage fill his eyes as he stood up and said, I thought you were a man of business, Kenneth, not a weak and pathetic man. You really can't bitch out now, so come here and finish cutting me open. I then firmly said, No, I said I can't. Ernie then proceeded to repeatedly scream the words, Cut me open!
Yo.
Cut me open! Cut me open! His words reverberated through my very soul like a sick chant, but I wasn't going to agree. Seeing I wasn't going to do what he wanted, Ernie then looked me dead in the eyes as he said, I really didn't want another one of our films to end like this. But since you have decided not to man up, I'll show you how to do it by cutting you open. I tried to run, but I was quickly subdued. I struggled as they forced me to the bloody table Ernie was lying on. I knew that I put myself in this situation, so there was no one I could blame but myself. I accepted my fate as they held me down and raised the blade, but right before it could reach my skin, the sound of police sirens filled the entire room. I watched the two cameramen and the other hooded figures all run in fear as Ernie screamed, You called the cops? It wasn't long after that, the door was knocked on, and we heard the words,
It's the police. We have you surrounded.
Ernie, who was still bleeding, then pressed the knife to my neck as the door was broken down. As the cops entered the room, they pointed their guns at Ernie as they said, Let him go, sir. Ernie, who was now crying, started shouting the words. Why can't people just leave us to make our art in peace? We are an evolved form of artists who have discovered the beauty of art through pain and death. So why can't you just let us express ourselves? The cops, who had no idea what Ernie was saying, responded with, the best thing for you to do is to let your hostage go. So please, drop the knife. Ernie had now realized that there were no other options for him, so he mumbled the words. I will open your eyes to see the beautiful art in death, even if it's the last thing I do. And with that, Ernie threw me to the floor and lunged at the cops. Ernie was shot 6 times, and I remember his corpse falling to the floor with a smile on its face. After the demise of Ernie, the entire warehouse was raided by the police. Numerous hard drives filled with morbid snuff films containing scenes of brutal murders, self-amputations, ghastly mock surgeries without anesthesia, and aggressive self-harm were found and confiscated. It was also revealed that Ernie was an alias, and that the man's real name was Ronald Duffer. He was a man that was formerly hospitalized after having numerous records of continuous self-harm. Apparently, he had managed to escape from where he was being kept, and he hadn't been found since. It was also revealed that he had been diagnosed with a rare form of extreme sexual sadism disorder that they called advanced voyeuristic sexual sadism, which was what led him to start making these snuff films and selling them for high prices to people who enjoyed the same sexual depravities.
Crazy.
I'm pretty sure that I would have died that day, but the cops told me that they had received a call earlier from a man called Christopher Hands, and he told them that his friend was terrified and about to do something stupid at this address. So they rushed down to the scene. I cried after they told me that, as I thanked Christopher under my breath. After I had answered all their questions and the investigations were through, the cops let me go. I remember the first thing I did after that was to rush to the hospital and hug my son. I knew I had potentially lost the last opportunity I had to save my son, but I knew he wouldn't have wanted me to kill a man and become a murderer just to save his life. The doctors told us that with dialysis, the life expectancy is 5 to 10 years. But my son died on the 2nd of February, 2019. These 4 years without him have been extremely hard, but I've learned to live with the pain. I sometimes beat myself up, as I usually wonder if I should have just done what Ronald Duffer wanted me to do and cut him open. But then I reminded myself that my son Richardson wouldn't have wanted that. On some days, I also wish I had spent more time with him during the time I wasted running around associating with psychopaths who made snuff films. I could go on and on about my regrets, but the one thing I don't regret was deleting the social media app called Facebook. Because while I thought it had given me the solution I was looking for, at the end of it all, it just gave me much more problems. I now know that many of the people behind the messages we receive on social media platforms aren't who we think they are. I know for a fact that there are potentially thousands of people like Ronald Duffer still on the platform now, and any one of you hearing this could be talking to one of them.
Not us, because we don't have to try to buy a kidney on Facebook Market, right? At least I hope so. My cousins know. Y'all know not to buy no damn kidney on Facebook Market, I'm sure. So I was like, should I end it? But I decided to, watch the last story with you guys, because even though I did already watch it, there wasn't no new reaction. It was just the same thing. That man was crazy for looking for a kidney on Facebook Market. Someone messaged you and said, oh, I can help you. How? This is Facebook. But hey, to each his own. I love you guys. Thank you guys for joining me. Bye.